The world has always looked infinitely big to us humans, and therefore the consequences of our actions have been almost non-existent in the environment. It's good to remember that it took thousands of years for us to spread all around the world. And as we conquered new areas, we divided the land into our land and their land. In other words, we created borders, territories and regions. And everything we were able to divide or share, we did. And what was somebody's own to keep, that was sacred too. So it was not appropriate to mistreat it or steal it. Maybe at the end of the day, we actually are quite selfish and we can't escape it. We have generally cared more about our own property than the property of others. However, when we spread to new areas, we could not divide the air or the oceans. You can't draw a line into the water, and the air could not be split into different parts. We could not separate the waves from each other, and nobody was able to declare that the gust of wind is mine. And so no one was responsible for them either. And we internalize this very well. We've been dumping garbage in the oceans and polluting the air because it did not cause immediate wars or complaints. If we did the same thing to our neighbor's backyard, they would let us know. But if we neglected to the property of no one, then no one would get angry. Now, we've learned that this kind of thinking is unsustainable. I mean, there are so many of us in the world right now that this thousands of years old attitude and way of thinking has come to an end. As the world became global, we realized that there is a line actually, it has already been met. We cannot pollute the seas or the air because the consequences are visible. We can no longer continue with the same pattern. The world is no longer infinitely big, but rather the size of the world is one day. In one day you can get anywhere you want, and the world has become very small. Now we overconsume the natural resources we have. I believe that the meaning of ownership or the purpose is changing, at last. Does every family need to own a big car when the whole family rarely gets in that car? Do you need to own a ski box if it's only used once a year? And what about the cottage? I mean, it's empty most of the time. Borrowing, renting, leasing, sharing, recycling and repairing is the future. According to some estimates actually, a drilling machine, it's being used only about 8 minutes during its entire lifespan. Instead of every household having their own drilling machine, what if we shared the tools with our own housing community or neighborhood? Or if this is not possible, instead of buying your own drill, should you first knock on a neighbor's door and ask if you could borrow theirs for the evening? Many innovations have emerged from a situation where resources were in poor use, but somebody found a better way. When a few students realized that a bed or a mattress was a resource they could benefit from, they set up Airbnb and gave customers a possibility to stay in the homes of ordinary people. Uber follows the same idea. The car is in the parking lot most of the time, meaning it's a resource that's used inefficiently. Now, through their service, you can benefit from that resource. Ordinary people can act as taxi drivers and offer a ride for money in a car that would otherwise be left empty in the parking lot. So, wiser and more efficient use of resources is to benefit us all. But we also need to be critical. I mean, new solutions that look good right now may bring new problems as well. Few, if any, solutions are perfect. In the 19th century, when animal rights activists protested about the living conditions of horses, they never could have imagined that a new technology, the automobile, would improve animal welfare conditions more than all their marches. Thanks to engineers and mechanics, the activists were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief as horse-drawn carriages were exchanged for cars. Technology is often the best way to improve conditions and reduce immediate suffering, even if it may not always seem that way at first. But when cars replaced horses, the horses were freed from their work, yes, but at the same time, cars increased the number and severity of traffic accidents. Globally, more than 3,500 people die in traffic each day, which is an appalling number. Would it have been better to stick to horses? I mean, in addition, cars have become a major global polluter, and tackling climate change is a challenge we can't afford to screw up. So, would it be smarter to go back to horses? Then the climate activists would be happy, but the animal rights activists would be upset again. So even when technology makes us a little more ethical, at least on the surface, it does not completely solve most problems. Debate always remains over whether the old problems were replaced with something better or worse. I mean, hunter-gatherers, they didn't have to think about ecological concerns or processed food, but they did die of starvation and disease. In the developed world, now we have streamlined food production, so we don't die of starvation anymore, but that new efficiency brought with it a novel problem. I mean, farm animals and the conditions in which they are raised. So activists are needed to raise awareness so that people can change their behavior and improve this new animal rights challenge. But the overall industry may only take an ethical step forward when we can make food out of, let's say, thin air and create it using bioreactors. I mean, maybe biomechanics and chemists will improve the conditions of livestock and experimental test animals more than any activists ever could. But we have yet to see what kinds of problems bioreactors then bring with them. Similar developments have taken place with shopping bags. Decades ago, we switched from paper to plastic because paper bags were believed to destroy forests. Now plastic bags are destroying the oceans and clogging our roadsides. Plastic bags have been increasingly replaced now with fabric bags because, I mean, they are now seen as the best solution. However, fabric bags require diligent use to offset the burdens created by the production process. So some people are starting to favor biodegradable bags and others are moving back to paper. Activists do important work, but the situation doesn't always change for the better, which we only realize in hindsight. Now, remembering the past with nostalgia it's easy, but thankfully the world has been moving forward and we've made progress on many old ethical problems. For example, issues related to slavery or human trafficking or inequality. Now, however, we are facing global threats and many of the trends look terrible. Even though modern cars pollute much less than the first automobiles, they still put a greater strain on our atmosphere due to their widespread use. Even though paper or plastic bags were once the best available solution, now too much is too much. A long life, a fulfillment of basic needs and happiness are now within reach for more people. But at the same time, the size of the population has become a challenge to the carrying capacity of the planet. Or actually the lifestyles of rich Westerners who are depleting the Earth's resources have become the challenge. The richest 10% produce half of the world's greenhouse gases, and everyone suffers from the results of climate change. So we live in a world where we have achieved tremendous advances, but as if in exchange, we've been given global existential problems. Would it be better to go back to 100 years ago when we didn't need to worry about climate change, but many of our basic needs gave us cause for concern? We humans, we are the smartest creatures that have ever walked on the face of Earth. So how is it possible that we are destroying the only home we have? We should learn to take care of what we don't own, or actually, we should understand that we own the climate together. So let's not misuse that property. Everyone has a responsibility to take good care of our environment. So whenever you have a choice to make, do what your grandparents would be proud of and what your grandchildren would be grateful for. Sustainability requires looking both ways.